Hey, good morning. Scott Luton, Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Greg, good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing quite well. Did you see I came prepared today? So, uh, no, we're doing well. Interesting news over the last couple weeks. Over the last week, I should say. It's been
Absolutely. Busy
crazy.
week.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got a jam-packed episode of The Buzz here today. We're setting a record. We got 3 featured guests, including a chief meteorologist. Who else brings you a chief meteorologist that knows supply chain?
Yeah.
You can count on us, your friends at Supply Chain Now. But it's all about Supply Chain Buzz, where we tackle the biggest stories and why they're important across global supply chain. So stay tuned, Greg, for what certainly will be an informative discussion that's going to raise our audience's supply chain IQ.
I will not touch the dial, Scott. I will be right here.
All right. Hey, good morning, Stefan and Sophia and Patrick. Sophia, loved your commentary on LinkedIn over the weekend. I tell you, she has been on the ball with lots of expertise and perspective. Okay, quick programming note, Greg, before we bring on John Davis. If you enjoy our live stream episodes, be sure to check out our podcasts, our John Buglino approved podcasts, right? Wherever you get your podcasts from.
That's right.
So I say that. Greg, I say that because we love our reviews here, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's fun to see what folks are saying. It's good. I mean, whether it's a 5 out of 5 or it's not, it's good to hear because we want to make sure that we're serving our audience. We tell people this all the time. Our number one priority is our community. So we want to make sure that we're hearing from folks and that we know that we are on track.
Well put, as always, the golden communicator, the one and only Greg White. But so John had some great comments to say. We really appreciate this. So I'm going to read this off from John Buglino, who's with Optessa, really interesting company. It's getting out of stealth mode, as he put it on a recent podcast. So he says, quote, 5 out of 5, listen up. Leaving a review is boring, but I'm going to share one with you anyway. I've spent the last few weeks listening, watching, engaging with a phenomenal team at Supply Chain Now. I try to listen live or catch a replay at some unholy hour, Greg, where I can focus on the message being delivered in the various episodes. There's always something to listen to, interact with, or share with your community to engage and enlighten with respect to the world of supply chain. Keep up the amazing work. End quote. John, good stuff there. If I had
Sounds like he might be listening to more than one of our programs.
That's right.
Boring and unholy hours tells me he's listening to not only the mainstream Supply Chain Now, but Supply Chain is Boring and Tequila Sunrise.
That's right. That is right. Well, appreciate that, John. If we had a Supply Chain Now gratitude kit, it'd be on its way. But we're working on that now with hats and T-shirts and whatnot. So good stuff there from our friend John Buglino. Hey, real quick, want to say hello to a variety of folks. We have Joseph Valentine, the reverse logistics guru, here with us here today. We've got
Every day is
Valentine's Day. We got Chris Barnes, fearless leader of Supply Chain is Boring.
Yeah.
Amanda, good morning, of course. Jeffrey Miller has been on fire. Love his commentary. Yes. I told him over the weekend that we never take a day off. He goes, supply chain leaders, it keeps on moving. There are no holidays.
Yeah.
So something like that. I'm paraphrasing Jeff. Good to see you. So our one quick call out before we bring on John Davis with Riskpulse. So Greg, you and I were on with Patrick Kelly.
Yeah.
The founder and host of the Produce podcast series, right?
Yeah.
That episode was published today. We've got a follow-up episode coming out soon. But
hot dog.
Give a quick shout out to Patrick and what we talked about.
Yeah, it was a great discussion around citrus and the citrus supply chain, and we had we were the guests, I guess, technically, it's strange to have somebody turn the tables on you, but it was great opportunity to get to sound off on that. So in my history, I worked a lot with the citrus and produce industries, So it was really, really interesting discussion. We had I hope we had some insightful questions, Patrick, but if they weren't, I hope you edited it so that it made it sound like they were. No, but that's worth a listen. Seriously. Because we had an industry expert, one of Patrick's oldest friends, and a producer of produce, a citrus producer.
That's right.
So
Michael and Patrick were great colleagues as we worked our way through a fascinating conversation, especially with someone that's been in the industry for quite some time.
Yeah.
So check that out. Our friend Patrick Kelly has put the direct link in the show, in the comments, and our team, of course, will be promoting that later today. So good stuff here. All right, want to say hello to Pierre and Arvind. Good morning. Great to have both of y'all here. Of course, our dog. Clay Phillips is here. So Clay, good to see you. And Chris Barnes says, Greg, hot dogs are not produce.
They're not even actually food. That's a good point, Chris.
All right. We're always hitting the most important topics in industry here on the bus.
Right. That's right. We're always serious, right? Very, very serious here.
Well, let's transition into, on that note, one of the biggest stories here in the States, at least, is we've got two really big storms in the Gulf of Mexico. And we're all trying to keep tabs on where they're going and how strong they're going to get. And we've got a repeat guest coming back. And this is an expert in the know, John Davis, Chief Meteorologist with Riskpulse. Hey, John, good morning. How you doing?
Good morning, guys. How are you doing?
Great, John. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, so John, I bet if you don't have clones here lately, you wish you had several, because I bet your email and your phone is staying lit up. So thanks so much for taking time out this morning here to kind of give the latest updates with our audience. I think y'all had a webinar earlier today already, and we'll touch more on that here momentarily. But tell us, what's the latest when it comes to Laura and Marco?
Well, we have some good news and we have some bad news. So the good news is actually Marco, and that's what we're looking at right here. So Marco is just off the coast of Louisiana. You can see the track that Marco took. It's a classic, what we call African wave. So it came off of Africa, was very weak when it went across the Caribbean, but gained some intensity in the Western Caribbean. And then in the Gulf of Mexico, there's been a lot of oscillations here. It got strong for a bit yesterday, hurricane, then now it's weakening as it does go closer to the coast of Louisiana. The good news, it's in a weakening mode as it does go toward Louisiana. It looks like landfall is going to be later on this afternoon or early this evening as a relatively weak tropical storm. That does not mean there are no impacts, but the impacts are relatively moderate. Some stronger winds, a minor storm surge, some heavy rains. So there will be impacts in regional areas of Louisiana, southern Mississippi, portions of Texas, but the impacts are relatively minor. And this does not look like an event that will tend to impact the supply chain in a big way in that area and then across the lower 48.
So, John, give us an idea of because I think it's relative for the folks on the Gulf Coast. What is a relatively small impact in terms of storm surge and wind and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so for the specifics of a storm like Marco, storm surge in general would be about 1 to 2 feet. So in some low-lying areas, there will likely be some issues. Winds gusting to 40, 50 miles an hour in that zone where it does make landfall. In rainfall, 2 to 5 inches in general, and some of that will be a little bit further inland. So certainly not a non-event, but far from catastrophic.
Yeah.
That is great news to hear, because and if you're ready to move on to maybe the more troubling news out of these two storms, any last comments around Marco, John?
Well, I think just one comment when you now start talking about Laura, which is the big deal, is that the situation that we're in right now, basically 2 storms in the Gulf of Mexico is incredibly unusual. There have only been 2 times in history when there's been 2 named storms in the Gulf of Mexico, one in 1933 and another in 1959. This
Right.
is close to unprecedented what we're going through right now with 2 named storms moving into the Gulf of Mexico.
Mm. It's unbelievable that how this year continues to play out, right? I mean, and as sad as that's a serious statement, as sad as that is. I mean, so let's move on though. Let's get the latest on Laura and John. What are y'all seeing there?
Yeah, this is the storm we are concerned about. And this is the storm that lots of individuals and businesses and the supply chain in general should be concerned about. Laura right now is on the southern tip of south central Cuba. This is the history of Laura as it moved across the Atlantic, and then it's produced some pretty big floods in places like Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, the Dominican Republic, and Haiti, now across Cuba. But that land interaction has prevented it from becoming very strong. The issue we're concerned about is the track. Once it goes in the Gulf of Mexico off the Cuban coast, which you can see here, that's going to be later on this afternoon, this evening, then it tracks toward the Louisiana Texas border, per se. There's a couple of things going on there which really cause us some concern. Number one, water temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico are very, very warm. Number two, atmospheric conditions in that pathway between Cuba and, let's say, the Texas Louisiana border are going to become highly favorable for intensification. That was not the case with Marco yesterday. There was a lot of wind shear across the region. We see wind shear going to minimal levels over the next, let's say, day. And then as it tracks through there tonight, tomorrow, into Wednesday, we see that both oceanic and atmospheric conditions being highly favorable for intensification. We have a term that we tend to use, and we've used this term a lot over the last couple of years, RI, rapid intensification. There are lots of models that are predicting rapid intensification between Cuba and when it makes landfall on the U.S. Gulf Coast. Certainly, it is absolutely in the realm of possibilities that this becomes a major hurricane, a Cat 3 or higher, by the time it makes landfall. Timing of landfall, late Wednesday into Wednesday night. Again, most likely somewhere near the Texas-Louisiana border, but all interest in the Houston metro area, much of Louisiana, still New Orleans, but certainly they're kind of on the eastern edge there. But all interest in that region need to watch this extremely closely, because this could be the type of storm that has major impacts in the region, and then those ramifications then tend to spin a web across much of the lower 48. And this could be the kind of storm that we talk about for quite some time.
Wow. Greg, any commentary before we move over to water temperatures?
Yeah, well, one of the things I am contemplating, and I know nothing, disclaimer, I know nothing about weather. But I do know that when big weather moves through, often it sucks a lot of the energy out of the atmosphere. And I wonder, in as much as Laura is coming through the jet wash, if you will, of Marco, if there is some chance that could lessen the intensification there.
That's a really, really good question here, Greg. So a couple of different comments there. Typically, when you have storms this close, which again, this really doesn't happen in the Gulf of Mexico,
right?
But we look at areas like the Western Pacific, off the coast of China or Taiwan or Japan, where this kind of thing does happen. Typically, when you tend to see interaction of 2 storms, you tend to have one dominant storm, right? They do not coalesce, they do not intersect and become stronger. One is the dominant form and usually tends to kill off the other one. There's another term that we can use. It's called the Fujiwara Effect. So the Fujiwara Effect is a term we use, again, not in the Gulf, but mainly in the Pacific, when you have 2 storms their circulations interact, and they dance around each other. These storms are a little bit too far apart to have a true Fujiwara effect, but usually in these situations, there is a dominant system. It looks like Laura is dominant in this case.
Okay. So it would be the inverse. If Laura had come through first, it might have wiped out or knocked down Marco. Okay.
Exactly.
So real quick, John, before we talk water temperatures historically, and Stefan asked about emergency personnel, you getting there and getting prepared. You know, Greg, was a few months back, we knew we'd be here, not exactly, well, nothing like these two storms at once, but we knew we were getting into hurricane season in this pandemic environment. And there was lots of concerns throughout the Southeast and throughout the Gulf from a state and local authority standpoint of exactly how to carry out prep and response operations in light of these challenges.
Right.
So I'm certainly hoping that, and John, have you had any information from the local areas that will be impacted in terms of where their response plans, you know, what state they're in?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's overlapping disasters. And I guess in this case, it's overlapping disasters on overlapping disasters. And the difficult thing about this situation is that Marco will cause some issues. But for those issues, power outages, for example, to be rectified, there's little time for emergency managers and crews, for example, to go out and, you know, help the people and get the power back on before Laura begins to move into the region late Wednesday and Wednesday night. So yes, Marco is not a huge deal, but it does tend to limit any kind of response prior to that, as overall individuals and companies prepare for the big event, which is Laura late Wednesday and early Thursday.
All right. Well, I know we're all hoping and praying that we don't see that RI, that rapid intensification that could be likely. All right. So as we wrap up here with John Davis, talk about surface temperatures and how you already touched on that earlier, but expound a little bit on that, John.
So what the graph that we're looking at here, I mean, there's a reason why this is happening. This just doesn't happen. But the reason this is happening is you could not have this happen if we didn't have a lot of fuel in the Gulf of Mexico. Of course, fuel is there for storms here to intensify. This is a chart that looks Gulf of Mexico water temperatures, what we call sea surface temperatures, over the year. So, of course, you know, we're cool in the Gulf of Mexico as elsewhere in the winter months. In the spring, we peak out, or the spring, we increase. We peak out in the summer. And this is a depiction of the last 10 years on a daily basis of water temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. In the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've increased markedly. And the final point that you see here means that we have the warmest water temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico that we've had in the last 10 years as of today. That's why we're talking about this today, is because the fuel for these storms in the Gulf of Mexico, and that's yet the item of concern, especially for Laura. Laura's going to have the warmest water temperatures we've seen in 10 years, and the combination of atmospheric conditions, which look very favorable for RI or rapid intensification.
So as that thing comes over Cuba, it's going to hit warm water without wind shear to degrade it, right? So it has the combination of fuel and a lack of degradation from atmospheric conditions.
It has the two key variables that come into play when you're dealing with systems here that rapidly intensify prior to landfall. That's why we're concerned about Laura for the middle of this week. Yes.
Well,
and it looked like on the map, John, it's going to hit farther towards Lake Charles, towards the west of Louisiana, or
as of right now, a kind of center. We got to be a little bit careful with center points in situations like this. But right now, the Texas-Louisiana border looks like that would be the area that would be most likely. However, this is going to be a bigger storm. So as it intensifies, it becomes larger. So not to focus on that particular area, the Houston metro area absolutely has to watch this extremely closely, as does most of Louisiana. So I wouldn't fix too much on the exact landfall, because hurricanes can be very big systems at times. And so that whole region here near the Texas Louisiana coast and extending out 100 or 150 miles, everyone in that zone needs to watch this extremely closely.
All right. So I really appreciate what you and your team are doing during these times. You are working double overtime, it seems, conducting webinar sessions each morning, and especially from a global supply chain standpoint, which is so fascinating how weather and global supply chain come together, and someone with your background and how they can share insights and perspective that is more nuanced than a lot of other stuff out there. So tell us more about these daily webinars that you're offering, and any other resources that the Riskpulse and the Resilience 360 teams are offering industry leaders.
Yes, we call this storm mode, and storm mode means that when we see a significant threatening situation, in this case to the supply chain, then we tend to do daily webinars until the threat is passed. That started this morning. If yesterday wasn't Sunday, we probably would have started yesterday morning, and that will continue tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning, possibly Thursday morning. And it's there to help individuals and businesses prepare ahead of time. Number one, for people, make sure your people are safe. Number two, for products, and to take contingencies as to begin to do things here. There's about 2 days here, until late Wednesday, that you can prepare and try to mitigate some of the risk, especially for the people, your workers, people in general, your families. Then the product is secondary as to looking at contingencies and changing overall product within the supply chain to prepare and mitigate risk in your specific operations.
Outstanding. Well, John, I wish we had different set of circumstances to have you on here today. We were always enjoyed your previous appearances, but again, appreciate what you and your organizations are doing. We hope that the best case scenario is one that plays out, but we'll be back in touch again. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise and kind of the current state of things with our team here. So John Davis, Chief Meteorologist with Riskpulse. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
Take care, John.
All the best.
All right. So Greg, I wish that was a more uplifting update, but it is what it is. And I really hope that that first storm, that was some good news, at least. The first storm, it wasn't going to be as much as a factor as it was initially feared, right?
Yeah, off screen, John said non-issue. So, I mean, not that there aren't concerns around that, but look, let's face it, the Gulf Coast is used to this, right? The reason that the Gulf Coast is the reason that it's such a target is because the Gulf of Mexico is a relatively shallow body of water for a long distance offshore, miles and miles offshore, especially. So those storms build up a lot of fuel off that warm water. But I think the key here is to just keep an eye on this storm and see how it does actually intensify, because as sophisticated as those models are, we're all forecasters in this industry. We know that there's the possibility that they're wrong to the high or low side. So we've just got to keep a close eye. One other point, Stefan Mao was asking while John was talking about the stores, the supply chain's ability to compensate for this. There are storage facilities around with plywood and other water and other materials specifically for this purpose. The question again, because in these times of this seismic societal disruption, right, whether we have the human power to deliver it. I think the good news is, while this has been a really active storm season, they haven't been incredibly impactful storms for the most part. We've had a lot of named storms, but not a lot of them making significant landfall and landfall issues. So the stores should be still in good stead, and the recovery crews are not they're not distracted with other recoveries, at least not right now. So, and it doesn't look like Marco is going to create some of that strain either.
So to our audience, we made it really easy. Not only do we have a direct link so you can connect with John on LinkedIn. But more importantly, we've got the direct link for you to sign up for those free daily webinars, which I'm sure if that 12 minutes we spent with John is any indication, I can only imagine how much wealth of information they present on those webinars. So check that out.
Riskpulse.com, correct?
That's the URL, but there's a specific registration link for the webinars we've got in the show notes to make it really easy. Okay, so moving right along, Greg, there's been also as much buzz as there's been about these storms in our neck of the woods. There's also been a ton of buzz about peak season, and it's and where freight rates and capacity is gonna play out. So tell us more, Greg.
Yeah, so we're going to talk in this story about long haul freight, and in another story, the sort of last mile issues that we're facing. But look, the fact is, even though the holiday season is still a few months away, obviously freight is getting started. In some cases, in a normal year, relatively normal year, much of the freight would be on its way or landed, but because of conditions in the freight industry, even the shipment of goods has started lately. So to give you an idea, air cargo has been really volatile with prices fluctuating. I'm going to say wildly because the article says wildly, peaking in mid-May. And our friends at Resilience 360, associated with Riskpulse, and the Business Continuity Institute, found that 37% of air shippers had some sort of disruption in air transport. And as we know, that market has shifted pretty dramatically. Companies are using not just the bellies, but also the seats of commercial airliners to ship goods from overseas. And the change has been significant for the marketplace. So, and additionally, a lot of apparel gets shipped by air freight. I think my experience has been mostly that's due to poor planning. But as there is a lot of apparel that didn't get sold this spring, and that may or may not be occurring. So that that could be something that we'll see as a change in the type of goods shipped on air freight. Ocean freight, similarly volatile. 15% of shippers had their transport significantly affected. And as we know, capacity was intentionally tightened earlier this year, and many blank sailings.
That's right.
There were 30 odd blank sailings that were unblanked recently, meaning released for the ships to be fulfilled and then shipped over here. But capacity from Asia to the West Coast has been lower than 2019 until July, and it's now decidedly above 2019. Spot rates are well above last year. Trucking spot rates. Let's talk about trucking. Trucking spot rates hit a low in April. I think we all know that most of the economy and most of the movement and most of the companies hit a low in April, but it was down 25% year over year. But the turnaround has been pretty dramatic, with trucking spot rates up 10% year over year in July. So part of the reason that volumes are higher is catching up for goods that didn't get shipped because of blank sailings, and of course, partially in prep for peak.
The news will continue. This is going to be, as we all know, a very unique peak season. We'll keep our finger on the pulse of all that takes place in the freight market. Some interesting comments in the comments. Sophia says Korean Air was one of the few airlines that made some profit in second quarter 2020 because they focused on cargo. Chris Barnes said he has heard of stories of companies sending people with the product on commercial planes. Hey, getting creative, whatever gets it there, right? And Kevin Bell says, I think it'll be interesting to see how traditional shipping by air or sea coincides with immediate needs and shipping of things like ingredients for drugs and supplements from other countries. That is something I have been working on with his clients. So good stuff there from Kevin. Hey, one question we had in comments, Greg, was where are the show notes? Well, based on how you're viewing this, if you're on LinkedIn, it's in the body, of where you joined, right? The body of the post where you joined. If you're on YouTube, it's in the body of that episode page right below the player. Amanda wanted to make it even easier, so she dropped the Riskpulse webinar direct link right into the comments of this live stream. So if you still can't find it, shoot us a note, amanda@supplychainnow.radio.com, and we'll make it as easy as possible. All right, so Greg, we're going to keep driving. No pun intended. Are you good with that?
Yeah. So a couple of things to note here. Oh, yes. Let's keep driving.
Okay. Hey, it's Monday. It is Monday, and it's been a busy time for everyone. So, this story here. So this comes from our friends over at the Wall Street Journal. In particular, this is Paul Ziobro. And this is a bit of a dated article. This is back from August 7th, but some of the comments within the article have really generated some buzz. So we're not going to dive deep into this story because we've got a couple special guests coming up here momentarily. And as new surcharges, increased surcharges, especially around peak, or especially around any of the recent times, that's not a big news story. It's happened quite regularly. But the sheer size of these UPS surcharges on larger retailers during this upcoming peak season, well, that's turning some heads. So in this article from the Wall Street Journal, UPS is saying that the new fees could be as much as $3 or $4 per package. Now, compare that to the last time UPS added peak season increases just 2 years ago, 2018. Those increases ranged at that time from 28 cents to 99 cents. So quite a big difference. But in particular, there's two quotes in this article, Greg, that we've seen really turn a lot of heads, maybe turn more heads than the surcharges themselves. The first one comes from Carol Tomei, CEO at UPS, relatively new CEO there. She says, quote, while retailers may squawk at price increases that come their way, large retailers have a way to spread that across and nobody knows, end quote. Very interesting comment. And Greg, we have two experts in industry communications, especially supply chain, joining us just in a few minutes. But what is your quick take on Carol Tomei's tone?
Callous is the word that comes immediately to mind. And it's very bad optics, especially for someone who's just taken over a company that is known to be callous, old-fashioned, and inefficient. And I think we all hope that Carol would sort of eschew the good old boy mentality of UPS and have a little bit more caring, empathic approach to the marketplace. But it does reflect some discussions that we had some months ago around whether these old-fashioned carriers can make changes and improvements to make last mile delivery viable. This indicates to me that not only perhaps they can't, but maybe they aren't even going to try to. The further part of this quote that is equally as disturbing is that they appear to be sort of discounting the possibility that they could make some improvements themselves, and instead are placing the responsibility on retailers and on consumers, and effectively dumping the responsibility on retailers and expecting them to effectively hide these price increases, which go to the benefit and profit of one of the largest shippers on the planet, and hide it from consumers when the margins, for instance, at a UPS or at a manufacturing company are far higher than they are at a retailer. In the best case scenario, retailers make a 3 to 5% net profit. Manufacturers tend to make double digits, 12 and 22% net profits. And of course, UPS is flying high. So it's disappointing. Frankly, as a supply chain professional, I'm disappointed. As a consumer, I'm angry because I am right there with John Haber on his quote on this.
And before we read that, one quick comment. You mentioned about the high-flying stock prices. UPS stock are at an all-time record high. So just quick point to be made there. So Greg, you and I, John got some attention with this quote here. And John, transparently, is a friend of the show. He's based here in the Atlanta area, a well-known industry expert in not only supply chain, but certainly freight. And he says, quote, "This is devastating to retailers. It's getting to a point where I'm starting to consider it gouging," end quote. All right. So Greg, Jeff, and others in the comments really liked John's frank take on this. So before we pull in Kara and Will, quick response, Greg, to John's comment.
He's dead on. I mean, look, John used to be at UPS. And he tried to champion for more fair play at UPS. And ultimately, he had to leave the company and start a company, Spend Management Experts, whose job it is to keep UPS honest on their rates. So I think that says it all.
Yep. Agreed. A couple quick comments here from the audience. Pierre says, "Once you make a quote in the public eye, then everyone's going to know."
Right. That's an excellent point, Pierre.
Jeff says their pricing power will bite them back. And finally, Barb says, all this emphasizes the reason for increased audit requests on your freight spend, which is a great point there. All right, with no further ado, we've got a couple of experts when it comes to building communication programs and communication tones and strategies that really hit the nail on the head. So join me, Greg, in welcoming Kara Brown, founder and chief revenue officer with Lead Coverage, and our dear friend, Will Haraway, founder and chief content officer with Lead Coverage. Hey, Will and Kara, good morning.
Well, and we got Kara.
I think
we go. Hey,
I think we've got you both on mute. So, we'll just make that quick adjustment. There we are. Kara, good morning.
Good morning. We'll meet it. So glad.
Well, I tell you, it's a chock-filled buzz this morning. So appreciate y'all's rolling with the punches here. So, let's start exactly, Greg. Let's start exactly where we left off here. I mean, I'd love to get y'all's take.
Yeah. So Will and I have worked together for years, and Will is an expert on supply chain marketing and PR. So I'd love to get your take, Will, on one, this statement, and two, as a PR professional, one, how do you let it get out of the house? And two, what do you do once the horse is out of the barn here?
Greg, I'd love to answer that question. I hope that you guys can hear me. I'm having
yeah, we got you.
Days, man.
Yeah, we got you.
All right. Okay. Having one of the days. So I'll answer quickly just to say, yes, that's definitely not ideal, right? I would probably work up some sort of a collaborative statement, that walks back some of those comments. I mean, that's you definitely got to pay attention to who you're putting in front of media and definitely have a good idea of what to say. Just someone in our position, that's definitely how we would definitely try and have that answer, have that question prepared in advance, so they would have an answer that's a little bit less inflammatory. But once the horse is out of the barn, like you said, you definitely need to go ahead and walk it back, I would say, and do it quickly. That's the key with all this stuff. You got to be fast.
Well, that opportunity has passed, because it was nigh on 3 weeks ago that she said that at this point. So I think the market's probably interpreted as she meant it.
Right. It's exactly.
Well, I think it's one thing to mean something, and it's another to actually say it, right? I think you can there are ways to approach specifically from a UPS perspective. There's such a massive power in the marketplace to come across that sort of unempathetic, I think as you called it, Greg, especially in a pandemic where we know the retailers are hurting, right? We're very aware of this. This is nothing new. Passing along that pain to your customer feels a little tone deaf.
Yeah. So Will, we've got a bad connection. We're getting some feedback on your connection, I believe. I'm going to bring you out of the stream.
Sorry.
We'll get you back. We'll talk soon. Yeah. Kara, great point there. And hey, Murphy's Law is alive.
Yeah, I wanted to hear what else Will, what else he's tracking in supply.
Will, drive on over. We can use my Wi-Fi.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey, so Stefan's got an interesting comment as always. And Stefan says, the whole world is more and more focused on sustainability and fairness. A reputation built in decades can be lost in seconds. Ask Volkswagen, they know. Great comment.
I really think UPS fully believes that they are completely above it. I really do. I think that this statement was so callous and so unapologetic that they fully believe that they can get away with it. And they probably can. I mean, what choices do we have right now? There's really only 3 players in last mile freight: Amazon, FedEx, and UPS. And of course, I guess we have to count the USPS, because until they go completely bankrupt, they'll continue to drain the taxpayers' funds to get things to our houses.
Well, John Haber, also to your point, Greg, talking about those 3 options, John Haber over the weekend mentioned how the pandemic just delayed Amazon's further rollout of a lot more to be a true third major option in terms of carriers. So we'll see how that plays out.
We're predominantly for Amazon Marketplace sellers right now, though that is a substantial amount of last mile traffic. But they have built and intend to build capacity to compete directly with FedEx and UPS.
Yep. Okay, so Kara, let's move on. Let's move on to some good news and some stories related to growth and more positivity. And on that note, Chris asked you, where is the new puppy?
She's downstairs in her crate. We have an 8-week-old Vizsla puppy, and why we thought it was a good idea to get an 8-week-old Vizsla puppy the same week that learning school or at home school started, virtual school started, is a little crazy, but it's been fun. She's adorable.
Well, it can be like pet day at class. You can do it, right?
Yeah, except this pet pees everywhere, which is really
yeah.
So, Kara, we had a great podcast. So moving on from the puppy chapter, which we'll have to get more updates in the coming weeks. We had a great episode where you came on and we really talked about successful sales and marketing growth and how a lot of companies were figuring out how to crack that code in a really challenging year. So to our audience, that is Kara's expertise. So here's your opportunity to pose questions around all of that to Kara and get her take. But while they can contemplate that, Kara, what are some stories out there related to growth, related to how other companies are tackling that and succeeding to break through the wall that has been 2020?
Yeah, well, I love the UPS example because they're the exact opposite of what we would recommend, right? They're also a behemoth in the marketplace, and like Greg said, they almost have no competition. But most of us aren't them, right? Most of your audience and our audience is not UPS or FedEx. And so one of the things that we've seen as a real challenge from a sales and marketing perspective in most of our clients and our audience is making the outside sales guy productive inside, which has been a huge challenge. So I've been in freight my whole career. Most of what we do is done at trade shows. Most of what we do is done on the golf course, right? Like these decisions are usually not made over Zoom. And I got a 65-year-old dad. He's a rock star. He's not so good on Zoom. Like, we'll just put that out there. So I think,
Eric, can you remind people of what a trade show is?
No, right? Remember when we used to be in the same place? And actually, the last time you and I saw each other in person, we were at Modex.
Was that right?
Like eating a burger over each other, right?
That's right. I recall that now. That's right.
And I remember walking through Modex, which normally has, 40,000 people in attendance. And it was a ghost town. And I thought to myself, holy cow, there's an opportunity here, right, for folks that can really turn the independent sort of in-person rep or outside rep into someone who can be really effective online. And it has been a real challenge for a lot of people.
Well, we hear about it all the time. I mean, so many companies come to us. They want that exposure that they used to get at trade shows, right? So
yeah, it's a huge challenge right now. So to answer your question, Scott, there's no silver bullet, right? But we are seeing that because everyone is at home, folks are definitely picking up the phone more than they would have been in other times, right? So it's August, it's going to be a little bit slow, right? But it's definitely in terms of recovery pipeline. We talk a lot about recovery pipeline. So what are the things you can do right now to help your recovery pipeline? You may not close. CapEx is still a little, tight. We've got just like the messages from UPS, folks are sort of messing with the marketplace. But to Greg's point, OTR is up year over year. We're seeing really, significant changes in supply chain planning for 2021. We believe just in the clients that we have that we're going to see a lot of changes in 2021 in terms of rebidding, enterprise contracts being shifted, et cetera. There's lots and lots of changing corporate sort of incentives and structures coming out from leadership. And so 2021 is going to be a huge year. And if your sales team is used to doing those deals on a golf course or over a steak dinner, now is the time to make sure you get some folks on staff that can handle it over Zoom.
Got to retool. And clearly lead coverage has been blowing up because of this need that y'all have identified and the solution you put together. On that note, Greg, we're really pleased to be partnering on a new partnership with Kara and Will and the lead coverage team. Fortunately, relationships still are perhaps more important than ever, and it's been really neat to rub elbows in different ways with Kara and Will through the years. Greg, you alluded to that earlier with you and Will, and as we're getting overwhelmed inbound to try to put our spotlight on things, we needed a great partner that could help not only manage that, but also help manage some of our outbound activity. Right, Greg?
Well, we have such a big and active community, as you can see in the comment stream on 5 live channels right now. But we have had so many companies come to us wanting access, wanting to be able to communicate their message, to present their value proposition like they used to on the golf course or at trade shows or at a steak dinner or whatever. And the additional thing that companies want and need these days is accountability for marketing. I can empathize with that because as a founder, it was always frustrating to me to go to a magazine or a trade rag or something like that and have them tell me they get this much reach. But, I don't know. At first, you couldn't even account for if you got a lead, whether it came from them. So one of the things, because we have gotten both of those requests, 1, we need voice, right? And 2, if you're going to give us voice, we want accountability for you to be able to do it. So sort of like Forbes has their brand voice type offering, we've combined with lead coverage to create this supply chain now lead coverage tool set where we actually will conduct a webinar on your behalf. Of course, a lot of our community attends that or has interest in it, or we can provide it to you to provide to your potential prospects. And then Kara and her team work with our team to get access to those people who registered for or attended the webinar and reach out to them and translate that into meetings where you actually have the opportunity. Kara, actually have the opportunity to talk to people, correct? As Stefan Mao just created a t-shirtism.
That's
Remember
right.
when we used to be in the same place? I think every one of your phone calls should open with that, Kara.
Yeah,
Agreed.
remember when we used to talk to each other in person and we had an in-person retreat. Don't judge. It was awesome. We took our temperature before we went. Everyone was safe. But we talked a lot about Owner Square, right? We are showing up the way we used to show up to a steak dinner or to a presentation or to some sort of RFP review online. We're showing up in our square. So what does that look like? How does it feel, right? How do you make someone feel really comfortable with you over Zoom? How do you make them laugh, right? Neither one of you are sorority girls, but I will share with you something that we did at our retreat, which was super fun. So when
and to set the stage, any organization can. I know we're kind of talking about our relationship, but this is universal right here.
Yes. So what happens when, and you guys are online all the time doing this every day. So you're introducing people, you're saying, welcome. We were just talking about this. This is actually an awkward thing for someone to do. You ever joined a Zoom call and someone's like mid-laugh and you don't know exactly what they're laughing at and it feels really awkward and you don't want to ask. So you just like sort of lurk, but you're definitely on the Zoom call, like super awkward. So we use the sorority rush bump group. Ask your daughters, they'll know. In terms of like, oh, Chrissy, this is Sarah. Sarah has a dog named Willow, right? And how to like make these transitions feel more normal online. And it's really hard. It's really hard, especially if your native application, anyone over 40, is not online, right? Like we didn't grow, like I'm almost there, like we didn't grow up, online the way that our kids do. So it's a hard transition for a lot of people to make.
Agreed. Well, and the challenge remains the same, despite how how the environment's changed. We got to drive revenue. You got to serve the customer. You got to serve more and more customers. You got to figure out that growth formula. So, it's really interesting to think about sales and marketing, especially from a supply chain, logistics, manufacturing standpoint, and not always just in that kind of that retail vein, right? So, Kara, what else? Sticking with this universal theme, is there another tip or trick or something you could share with our audience that, regardless of their position or sector, that might be something neat to try to apply and experiment with?
Yeah, we have a very simple formula. The formula is share good news, i.e. get on Supply Chain Now, right? Share your good news, your specific good news, whatever that is. 2, track who's interested. And 3, follow up. And what it seems to be really hard for people is the track who's interested piece. So back to Greg's question earlier of, I used to be a VP of, sales, and I never got marketing to tell me like who actually showed up for something, and was there really ROI in that trade show, and what did we spend $200,000 on? Like I've been there, done that. So the democratization of these technology tools, in addition to the Zoom of the world, HubSpot, lead forensics, Crystal knows, like so many tools that your teams could be using to track exactly who's interested. So InsideSales.com and Harvard did a study in 2017 that said if you can talk to a human within 5 minutes of them showing you a buying signal, you have a 900% chance, better opportunity to close that deal than if you wait 10 minutes.
Wow.
And I can send you the link. It's amazing. And so we focus on that first 5 minutes. So what does that mean? Track who's interested. You can use any number of technology tools. We like HubSpot. It's almost free and it's really easy. And then follow up, right? And like we were talking about earlier, we used to follow up in person. We used to set a meeting for coffee. We used to set a meeting for lunch or get on an airplane and fly to someone. And that's not happening anymore. So following up within 5 minutes with an actual phone call, right? And picking up the phone these days is so important. And it's so hard for so many people. And making that first call can feel really invasive. It can feel like, oh, I don't like to make cold calls. Well, these aren't cold calls anymore, right? The cold call essentially should be dead. Everyone you should be talking to should be someone who has watched your podcast on Supply Chain Now. They've come to the webinar. They've told you they're interested. If someone has given you a buying signal, they are asking for you to follow up. There are so many opportunities for people to get touched nowadays digitally, that if someone's reacting to something you're sending them, you're clearly hitting a nerve. Number 1, good job, because it's really rare. And number 2, be sure to take advantage of it. So we're super excited to help the Supply Chain Now audience get that follow-up touch, right?
Hey,
and follow up.
All right, you gotta before we let you go, you gotta share your quote, your famous quote that's come out of some of your recent interviews. Whose time is this?
Oh, this is Supply Chain's moment.
There we go.
100% it's Supply Chain's moment. Okay, so you guys were talking about Forbes earlier. So Fortune, who has never given an iota of care about supply chain, has never cared before, is doing their whole supply chain symposium thing, right? And they want to charge $1 bazillion for it, and they're really excited about it, but they don't know anything about it. They have not spent the last 15 or 20 years talking about supply chain because it hasn't been a thing. So I'm super excited about this being supply chains a moment. I think there's so much change that's going to happen in the space between now and 2025. I think we're going to see the democratization of software for the space. Freight tech is taking off, right? My friends at Master are doing cool stuff. Like there's so much cool stuff happening in the space, and we're finally sort of getting light shined on us.
Yes, love that. Love that comment. Hey, right. One last thing. We're kind of talking tips and tricks, sales and growth. I'm gonna throw a recent tip I came across more from an entrepreneurial standpoint that I bet is going to resonate with you and Greg. And over the weekend, it was an article from Pat Flynn in a publication called Fast Company, which I really have dug for years. He's talking about this 20% itch rule, and it really resonated with me. He says, quote, delegate 10 to 20% of your time per week to scratch that itch. Free thinking is so important when it comes to creativity and innovation, end quote. So he's really talking about just stopping, no action, no emails, no more Zooms, and just contemplating the business and given that ideation and that opportunity to contemplate, the model and what you're doing. And that really stuck out to me. Kara, I want to get your quick take, and then Greg followed by yours.
Scott, I have a very similar one. Have I told you about the $10,000 hour? So the theory is you have 10, 100, 1,000, and $10,000 hours. And as a leader, it is your responsibility to free yourself up for the $10,000 hour. So every time I do something like, I don't know, set my own schedule or pay my own bills or buy my own lunch, I am essentially stealing from my company because I am using my time, which should be $10,000 time, for a $10 task. And I love it. And I love sharing it with new entrepreneurs specifically, because a lot of times we get in the myopic of like, oh, I have to make sure this logo is perfect. And it's like, no one cares about your logo. So I love the idea of freeing yourself up for the $10,000 hour.
I do too. All right, Greg, quick take before we let Kara go and give our audience a few final announcements.
10% is a bare minimum, and 20% is a lot of time. Think about that. If you work only 5 days a week, which is rare for an entrepreneur, it's a whole day, a whole work day. So figure it's 10 hours of your 50 that you're probably really working if you're an entrepreneur. So
that's a lot of time.
Make the commitment, though. It is definitely worthwhile.
Yeah.
Right. Free mind time. If you think about it, Velcro was invented while walking through a field, right? Not while working on science.
Right. Sending that 70th email of the day and on your 10th Zoom of the day.
There are people at 3M and probably at many, many more companies now who get paid to stare out a window and think of ideas.
Yep.
That's their $10,000 hour.
Of course, that old adage, work smarter, not harder. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Ogapawa. All right. So, Kara, last $10,000 question. How can folks connect with you?
Yeah, they can connect with us through reaching out to you all. I'm super excited about our partnership. Cannot wait to get started on everything. And then we are at leadcoverage.com. Will and I work together. Been together for, gosh, we were just talking last week. Been working together since 2012, which, feels like a really long time now.
That was a whole crisis ago, if you think about it.
A whole other crisis. So leadcoverage.com, Kara at leadcoverage.com.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much, Kara. I really appreciate what you do and your thought leadership in the industry, right? And folks, we have to give folks the link back to her last dedicated interview with us. We'll see if Amanda can do that. But Kara Brown, founder and chief revenue officer with Lead Coverage. Kara, we'll talk with you soon.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kara.
All right. I got to share this, Greg, from our friend AA in the air capital of the world, Wichita, Kansas. He says, I like the new normal. My takeaway is building your relationship in social media, webinar, podcast. Podcast is placing cold calls in the freezer. I like that.
It's really interesting because we've sort of reluctantly gone this direction, right? We have tried to be all about content, all about the community, and we still will continue to be. But there are companies that need to get their voice heard. And because events don't exist anymore, this is our way of doing it. We've heard from the folks that want to be heard in our community, that they want this accountability. And the combination of, we put together these campaigns. So if you're interested, you can reach out to us or reach out to Amanda. But we put these campaigns together to get people recognized, to let our listeners who might be interested in a particular service to do their research before they have to talk to anybody, which is the way people want to do it these days. But at the same time, we've worked really hard and carefully constructed this thing to allow the access to be at the pace and desire of the recipient rather than the selling organization, but also to enable some accountability so the selling organization knows whether they're making connections or not. That is so critical to people. And that was the last sort of linchpin to this thing that's really allowed us to launch this. So, I mean, if it's something that you're interested in, if you are a service provider particularly and you feel like you're not getting voice, then, talk to us and we'll help you figure out a way to make it happen.
Yep. Well put.
That's enough advertising, don't you think?
Well, everyone here that is in the comments, that's tuned in wherever they are, we're all trying to figure out how to crack the code and grow, whatever that means in your business, your organization, you name it. What I like, and how I'm taking your comments is how that can let us serve as the voice for more people, more practitioners, for help.
That's right. I mean, we get the best, right? Our motto is highlighting the best in all things supply chain. The Sandra McQuillans, who, by the way, wished you happy birthday yesterday. Gotcha. And Rick McDonald and even people like Tandria, the good people from UPS, and other professionals in the marketplace, right? So that's our primary goal.
That's right.
But at the same time, we do feel this obligation for these companies and for our listeners and for our community to know what the heck is out there, because it's as hard to know what's out there nowadays as it is to present if you are out there. Because again, the live events, hey, it wasn't just vendors who went to those live events. People went seeking solutions, and now it's really hard to get access to those. So we just want to create that connection is all. That's
right. Create a connection, serve the industry, and amplify the voice of the industry with all the great people. I mean, from Stefan to Sophia, Mark Preston, I see you. Thanks for that comment there. The world and certainly the supply chain industry needs to hear from these incredibly sharp individuals that are part of our community. So we're trying to build the biggest spotlight possible and blast it from shore to shore. So on that note, you're talking events. We've got a new event that we're really pleased to be involved with, and that is the Flow 2020. That is the future of logistics, operations, and warehousing. So, Greg, it's the 6 River Systems User Conference. It's taking place September 16th and 17th. It's free to attend. You and I have talked about how these groups and associations or companies are taking a hit and just absorbing the cost to provide opportunities for folks to network and connect and learn, right? It's a big value there, big gap in the market there, right?
We've seen so many companies. I mean, again, AIAG, the Automotive Industry Action Group, they pivoted instantaneously and opened up first of all, went online from a physical event and then opened it up to the whole marketplace. SAP did the same thing with Sapphire. Lots of companies are opening it up to the whole marketplace. There's such a huge opportunity for learning and to get your message out in this regard. And by the way, 6 River Systems has been around for a while, but they also got bought by Shopify. So this is a heavy hitter player. And if you think about e-commerce and fulfillment and last mile delivery, these are people who should know. So
absolutely. Great point.
What I'm going to say. Listen up.
Listen up. That's right. All right. So a couple keynotes as we've got, we're showing there, Craig Miller, the Chief Product Officer at, as Greg said, Shopify, and Jean Michelle Lemieux, the chief tech. What's that?
Jean-Michel.
Sorry, thank you.
Okay.
I'm working on my French. I promise everybody.
I'm working on your French.
The chief technology officer at Shopify, two of the keynotes that will be there. I think we've got the direct link in the show notes, making it easy. And you can check out all the different breakout sessions. I think you can plan your own, journey throughout the conference and certainly connect with all the other attendees. So good stuff there. All right. So this has been a supercharged edition, tackling a wide range of things here on the Buzz, from the troubling developments we've got from a weather standpoint in the Gulf and beyond, to some troubling developments when it comes to corporate communication, and we'll see how what is the next shoe to drop there, to really more of an uplifting session and an educational session with Kara Brown.
How to get the word out, man. You got to get the word out. That's right. It's critical now. And we've heard it over and over again from companies that want to do it. And it's not as easy as it used to be. It's dramatically different. So that's a great observation on her part.
Yes, agreed. So in the comments, it looks like Mark Preston is obligating me to cover drinks for folks at these conferences. Hey, I'll cover all the drinks in Walton County. So we'll see.
At your house.
That's right.
Mark, he didn't get a hole in one. He doesn't know everyone.
Right. AA Professor Mohib says he's inspired by Benjamin Goldkling. That makes two of us, and probably three of us with Greg. Benjamin's a sharp guy. He has been on the live streams with us, sharing some of his observations. So I am too, AA. One quick comment. So audience, we're here for you. You know, we're building this platform to get your voice out there. Thanks so much for participating and really leaning in and engaging. We got a ton of feedback on last week's webinar. I know there's 1,000 webinars a day these days, but the webinar we had with Rod Shurkin and Kelly Barner on a common topic, which is post-COVID-19 supply chain. What does that landscape look like? But they hit it out of the park, especially from a procurement standpoint. Did a great job. I mean, the feedback continues to come in and across social media. So you can check that out for free on our YouTube channel. And you can find that if you go to supplychainradio.com. And if there's anything that we've talked about today, resources or you name it, that you can't find, shoot Amanda a note. Hardworking CMO at Supply Chain Now here. Shoot her a note at amanda@supplychainnowradio.com. And we appreciate all that she does while leading the Luton Academy here at Supply Chain Now. Okay.
Luton Education Academy.
That's right. And for those that may not, we have 3 small kids learning from home as school has started back. So that has become the de facto Luton Academy.
How long have they been back in school, Scott? 2 or 3 weeks?
We've been back since like August 2nd or 3rd, I want to say.
Wow.
So but you know what? They're doing great. They're doing absolutely fantastic. And that all that is to do how smart they are and how smart their mom is. So I'm really, really appreciative that we're all making do. We all have our own choices to make as we navigate through these times. But I'm really proud of that. All right. So Greg, before I sign off here, when you think of 1 or 2 key takeaways from today's session, what would that be?
Don't be like Carol Tomei and me. Think about what you're going to say before you say it. No, seriously, let's, that is a little bit serious, but look, let's have some empathy. Let's not expect, though, big companies to have empathy. But wherever you can, do your part. It's important, particularly in these times. It's important for people. And it's important to remember those who are unempathic when times get better as well. Believe me, there are companies from the last economic crisis that I don't do business with because of how unempathic they were. And when you have the freedom, I think somebody in here, it was a lot of minutes ago, said it could come back to bite you if you are unempathic, right? Be a good corporate citizen all the time, not just when it's opportunistic, but maybe even when it's a little bit painful.
Yeah. Well, love that. We need a lot more empathy right now, regardless of what storm you're weathering. So that's a great note to end on. Really appreciate all the great comments, all the great participation. I love these live streams. I love hearing from the audience, and of course the guests bring it. I mean, we had 3 home run guests, new supply chain buzz record. Even if Will,
a lot of swooshing,
it's a lot of swooshing, and we'll have Will back on Hollywood Haraway. He never ventures too far away from our programming here. So, hey, to our audience, check out the resources at supplychainnowradio.com. Find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. Hey, be like Greg. Do good, give forward, and be the change that's needed. Help someone out this week. And with that in mind, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.